last time together, we zoomed in on Jesus' relationship with his disciples and uncovered the mind-blowing fact that he calls them his friends. We examined his approach to where he invested his emotional energy and looked at his intentional friendship with Peter, James, and John. In this session, we're going to zoom out from the inner circle and explore the life of the huddle. We will ask what the fundamental components of friendship look like and consider why Jesus thought it was important to be friends with people who are different from us. To consider how we help our friendships to fly, we're going to begin by taking another look at what Jesus said in John 15. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. Everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. So what can we learn from Jesus about the nature of true friendship? Well, firstly, it is clear as you read the Gospels, the eyewitness biographies of Jesus from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that Jesus spent the vast majority of his time with his closest friends. As we learned from when we looked at the pressure on friendship, we discovered how important time is. And Jesus generously and purposefully spent time alongside the disciples, teaching, walking, fishing, eating, and demonstrating what kingdom life is like. Mark tells us of his purpose in recruiting the apostles, that they might be with him. So if you're looking to deepen your friendships with a few people, the first two irreplaceable ingredients are time and presence. We remember who is there for us, and time is precious. When Jesus says that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends, he is speaking just before going to the cross to literally die for them. Now, we might never face that choice, but the application for us is to lay down our time, our diaries, schedules, and agendas, even when we don't feel like it, for the sake of our friends who need us. And when I reflect on my friendships, I see the importance of friends being physically present with me. Part of the agony of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we all faced a common trauma, and yet we did so physically isolated from those we needed to help us through. And I was grateful for Zoom and FaceTime, but they were a poor substitute for the embrace of a good friend. I will always remember the night my dad died. I was 21. He died of a heart attack suddenly one morning. In the days that followed, I cannot remember much of what anyone said to me in those tear-drenched hours. But I do remember vividly my best friend Adam just being with me. That night we sat in my kitchen, unable to sleep. I was numb and unable to process the agony of the events of the last 24 hours. My friend simply sat with me. Words were few, tears were abundant, and I will never forget the greatest gift he could have given me at that time: his presence. The next thing we learn from Jesus is the next critical ingredient for depth in friendship, and it's utterly vital if we are to build trust with those around us. He states in verse 15, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. As his close friends, they see him at the highs and the lows of his ministry, weeping at the tomb of Lazarus and turning water into wine, rejected by his family and calming a storm, the agony of Good Friday and the victory of Easter Sunday. Jesus makes his heart and the heart of the Father known to his friends. On a number of occasions in the Gospels, Jesus is disarmingly vulnerable. We find him weeping over Jerusalem in Luke 19, grieving at the tomb of Lazarus in John 11, and with a sorrowful and troubled soul in the garden in Matthew 26. And there is nothing like vulnerability for deepening relationships. If you want followers, post about your achievements. But if you want friends, talk honestly about your hopes, fears, and failures. And vulnerability takes great courage. We open our heart up to others and it feels like weakness. But there are no shortcuts in building trust with our friends. And here's what we often find. When we open our heart, it often unlocks the heart of our friend. And there's a final lesson I want us to lean into as we reflect on Jesus and his friendships. And that is who Jesus chose to be a part of his huddle. What was the makeup and dynamic of the disciples? Let's remind ourselves of the 12. Simon, whom he named Peter. His brother Andrew. James, John, Philip, Bartholomew. Matthew, Thomas. James, son of Alphaeus. Simon, who was called the Zealot. Judas, son of James. And Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. When we zoom in on who they are, it's probable that 7 of the 12 were fishermen from around Bethsaida. This was a tight-knit community, which means that it's highly likely that Peter, Andrew, James, John, Thomas, Philip, and Bartholomew knew each other before Jesus called them. Why is this important? When I walk into a room full of people I don't know, there's a kind of subconscious process that goes on inside me. I ask, who are the people here who are like me? Who will I have enough in common with to start a conversation? And this is a really natural thing to do. We are wired to connect with people who like the same music and hobbies as us, people who look like us, talk like us, and laugh like us. And connecting like this is a really good thing. And when Jesus chose these 7, he is reinforcing this human wiring. It is good to be friends with people we have things in common with. When making friends, try to find common ground to stand on. But there's another critically important lesson. There were 5 more followers who had less in common. Among them was Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Zealots were revolutionaries, freedom fighters who passionately and violently opposed the Roman occupiers. And then we meet Matthew. We read, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. The fact that he was called from a booth means that culturally, he was not just a tax collector, but a little mockers, the worst type of tax collector, a major colluder with the Roman Empire, who had sold his religious and social identity for a quick buck. It's safe to say that not only were Matthew and Simon ideologically opposed, they probably wanted to kill each other. Now, what's important for us to notice is that Jesus was intentional about choosing friends who were different from each other. And this is an important message for our world today. As a society, we are increasingly divided across race, wealth, politics, and age. And I believe Jesus has something profound to teach us in this area. I believe friendship is the antidote to a divided world. And your inner circle does not need to look like the United Nations. But my encouragement to you is to intentionally invest in friendships with people who are different. Don't miss out on the beautiful richness of life made possible by diverse relationships. When I think of the church, I can picture no other environment full of such a diverse group of people. My encouragement to us is to celebrate this where it is and aspire to where it could be. Some questions for you to reflect on at the end of this session. How can you be more vulnerable with your inner circle of friends? How can you take conversation to a deeper level? Who do you know who is different to you? How might you grow your friendships in this area? What do you love about the diversity of the church? Take a moment to celebrate God's gift to us, that we are different, yet united in Jesus.